Every December, I always enjoy watching the year-end review shows that all the major networks do. They'll look back at all the major life-changing, world-changing events that happened over the past 12 months and put them into a 1-hour special. It's always fun to look back and see what happened over the past year, but I've been thinking about it just in the past few weeks that if things don't slow down soon, they're going to have to start preparing for and showing the 2020 year-end review in September this year. There's been so many major events take place over just the first 6 or 7 months of our year here in 2020. Think about just some of these major events. Australia almost burned down. World War III almost started. President Trump was impeached by Congress. Then the Senate acquitted him. Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash. The coronavirus has taken over the world and shut almost everything down. Murder hornets were spotted in the U.S. Racial protests and riots have been going on across our nation from coast to coast. A Siberian dust storm even made its way all the way to America last week. You might have seen the meme on the internet where there's this lady kind of looking out her window and it's almost like she's trying to figure something out, and it's got these words up there as the caption. It says, "I'm just trying to figure out what chapter of Revelation we're doing today." I think all of us have kind of felt that way at some time this year. It's just, my goodness, there's so many crazy things happening, one right on top of another, and what in the world is going on here? In fact, I've heard a lot of people say this phrase, "I've never lived through anything like this before." Even a lot of older people have said, "I've never seen anything like the stuff that's going on this year before." A lot of times that's followed by the question, why do you think God's allowing all this stuff to happen? You know, we all tend to view events in our lives, or we all tend to perceive events in our lives through the lens of our own experience. Well, my experience is the church. You know, my life is pretty much the church. Before this year, we've closed our doors from time to time. We probably average about once every other year. We'll have a hurricane come along, or we'll have a snowstorm come along and have 6 inches of snow on the ground, and we've got to close our doors for a Sunday. That's never bothered me. I understand that. I always kind of viewed it like the Sabbath day in the Old Testament. You know, it's out of the norm, but you got a little break from the norm, and then you're right back to normal the next Sunday. You go along as normal and as everything else was planned. Well, when we had to close our doors back in March for the coronavirus, I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. I absolutely hated it, but I understood. It was the right thing to do. You know, it was to protect everybody and the right thing to do at the time, and we all didn't figure it would last for too long. Well, after the first couple weeks, I got used to it. I kind of got into a groove and got used to the new norm, decided to make the best of it. And during that time, I kind of viewed it like the 7th year that we read about in the Old Testament. You know, to the Jews, God commanded the Jews, the Israelites, He said, work the land for 6 years, but on the 7th year, you're to give it a rest. Don't plow the land, don't plant it, don't even go out and harvest crops from it. Instead, live off of what I'm going to bless you with from the 6th year, from the 6th year, and you can go out and take a little bit of what the land naturally produces by itself. So those 3 months that we were out of church and the doors were shut down, they kind of felt like that. They kind of felt like that 7th year that we read about the Israelites having in the Old Testament. But man, when June came around and we were finally able to come back to church together and just have fellowship with one another, I was excited, I was fired up, I was ready to go, and it was so good to be back with the church again, back with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And I know not everybody was able to come back, but we had so many come back and we're just able to love on each other, and it was so exciting. Even with some of the precautions that we were taking, it was still just good to be together. Well, now that we've had to close our doors again because of the recent COVID outbreak in our community, it's starting to feel like 2020 is not the 7th year that we read about in the Bible, but instead it seems like it's the year of Jubilee we read about in the Old Testament without all the celebrating. Now, if you're not very familiar with the year of Jubilee, I encourage you to open up your Bibles to Leviticus chapter 25. If you read that entire chapter, it goes into great detail explaining exactly what it is. I'll read for you just a few verses. Verses 10 through 12 sums it up in a nutshell. It says, consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the untended vines. For it is a jubilee, and it is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. So every 50th year, God commanded the Israelites to celebrate this year of Jubilee. And during this year of Jubilee, there were three major things that would happen. You had the freedom of the slaves, the restitution of property, and the return to a simpler lifestyle. Just a reminder that we don't need to be going 100 different directions all at the same time. Let me expand on those three things for just a minute so that we can have hopefully a better understanding when we address the question, why is all this stuff happening in 2020? If you go back and look at those three things, it starts off, the major event that happened was the freedom of the slaves. Their form of slavery in the Old Testament, as it's addressed in Leviticus, was a lot different than how we would view slavery through the lens of American history. Most of the slaves that they had were slaves either because of punishment or because of poverty. There were a lot of cases where somebody had done someone else wrong, and the legal system had determined that the punishment for the wrongdoer meant that they were to be enslaved to that person they had done wrong to for a period of time. Other people were enslaved because of poverty. They simply weren't able to take care of themselves. Maybe they had some bad luck. Maybe they'd had some bad management skills financially, but they weren't able to take care of themselves, so they willingly enslaved themselves to a fellow Israelite who would work them, but also provide for the needs of that person and their family. Well, when the year of Jubilee came, the slaves were set free. The freedom was given to the slaves, and they were free to return back to their old life. Now, if they chose to stay enslaved, they could do that, but the freedom was theirs to do with it whatever they wanted to. The second major event that would happen during the year of Jubilee was the restitution of property. Now, when the Israelites entered the promised land, God gave that land to the whole nation, but he divided it by tribe. Each tribe was given a certain portion of land, and within that tribe, each clan and each family was given a specific plot that was theirs. Well, you couldn't sell your plot of land permanently, but you could do what we would call in our society, rent it out. And what you rented it out on was based on the number of years left between the Jubilees. Now, if you did it right after a Jubilee, you would rent it based out on 50 years. If you did it 10 or 40 years into a Jubilee, you would do it based on, all right, you've got 10 years to go, so I'm going to rent it at a rate of I'm going to have this land in my possession for 10 years. But at that year of Jubilee, when that came, all the land went back to the original owner. Now, if they wanted to rent it out again, they could do so, but all the land went back to its original owner. The third major event that happened during the year of Jubilee, and this was such a huge one, was that it was a return to a simple lifestyle. During the 50th year, the land was to receive rest. God commanded the Israelites, he said, don't plant the fields, don't plow them, don't harvest them, nothing. They were to eat only what naturally came from the land and what he had provided from the years past. Now, that not only gave the land rest, but it also forced the Israelites to return to a simpler lifestyle for a year. It forced them to go back to more of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, that simplicity that comes from that, instead of the more complex lifestyle of a farmer-rancher. Now, that's the year of Jubilee in a nutshell that we read about in the Old Testament. Think about this thing with me for a second. If it only came around once every 50 years, there was a good chance that you would only ever live through one year of Jubilee in your lifetime. There was a chance that you would live through 2 Jubilees, but if you did, you would only experience one of them as an adult, when you were the one making decisions for your family. That meant that the year of Jubilee was something different than you'd ever lived through before. I imagine people back then were saying the same thing that we're saying today. Man, when the year of Jubilee came, said, man, we've never lived through anything like this before. 2020 has been a lot like the year of Jubilee in that sense. It's been a year of major, life-changing, world-changing, cultural-changing events. It has everybody saying, I've never seen anything like this before. And it has a lot of us asking that question, why do you think God is allowing all this stuff to happen? Now, I don't think anybody can know specifically the answers to that. I've heard some very interesting takes on it. But if we just go back to the Bible and go back to the Old Testament and go back to that year of Jubilee to see the reasoning for why God wanted to turn his people's world upside down once every generation, maybe we can gain a little bit of insight into why maybe our world has been turned upside down this year so far. You know, maybe it's like the land returning to its original owner, and God is trying to get us back to where we need to be as the body of Christ. Maybe the simplicity that the year of Jubilee brought is God trying to get us to slow down a little bit and maybe return to a more tranquil lifestyle where we're still from time to time and take time to realize that He is God. Maybe like the slaves being set free, God is trying to set us free, His people today free from some of the things that this world tends to take us captive with. You know, maybe God is using all the craziness that has happened in 2020 to accomplish some of these things. Or maybe the answer lies in verses 20 and 21 of our text, there in Leviticus chapter 25. In that passage, God says, you may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? And God answers this. He said, I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. Listen to this. The Lord's given some instructions here about the year of Jubilee. But in the middle of this chapter about Jubilee, He uses an example from something that was more familiar to the Jewish people, that 7th year rest. And God told them during that 7th year, it says they would naturally have that question, all right, God, if we don't plow the fields, if we don't plant a crop, if we don't harvest food, what are we supposed to eat? What are we supposed to survive on? That would have been a natural question. And God's answer was, trust me. Have faith in me. If you do what I command, I'm going to bless you so much during the 6th year that you're going to have enough to eat for 3 years. And if you look at back what He's saying here, it makes sense as it goes along with the year of Jubilee. They would have enough to eat that 6th year when it was harvested, the 7th year that they were commanded every 7th year not to plow the land. But then if you go through those periods of 7 years and another period of 7 and another, after 7 of those periods of 7 years, you got 49 years, and then would come the 50th year, the year of Jubilee. So that meant that every time the year of Jubilee came around, there were 2 years back to back when the Israelites were commanded not to touch the land. Don't plan on any of your food coming from the land. I'm going to provide for you from that 6th year. What that means is this. The year of Jubilee, it was more than a year of celebration. The year of Jubilee was a year of renewing of faith in God and His promises. Faith that He always provides. And faith that He always provides in abundance. The year of Jubilee was a reminder that our cup runneth over with God's blessings every single day of our lives. You know, sometimes the situations around us, they make that harder to see than others. But we know that He's always there. And we know that He always provides. Even during those times when we go to the cupboard and it looks a little bare. Even during those years when it seems like all the craziness is going on and we've never lived through this before. As His people, we're called to have faith. And we're called to trust Him to provide and to trust Him to bless. And you know what? He always did in the Old Testament. He's got a track record for all of human history that He has always taken care of His people. And He's always continued to bless us. You know, even during this year that seems to be piling one thing right on top of another. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm scared to see what August might bring now. If we keep our faith in Him, and if we keep our trust in Him, we know that He will provide. And we know that He will bless. Let me give you this encouragement before we close. Please don't lose heart. Because God, He is always, always good. God bless you.
Good morning, Gold Point family and Junior Church kids. I'm so excited to bring you another lesson on the fruit of the Spirit. As we did the last few weeks, we're going to go ahead and start again with the game. So, here you go. Name this fruit. This fruit grows on more vines. It may look like one thing, but it's supposed to be another. So, I'm going to say if you guess one of these things, then I'm going to say you got it right. If you picked a blueberry or a grape, then I'm going to say you got it right because they look really like blueberries. I typed in grapes. So, if you picked one of those, you are correct. Here's the second one. The second one is, name this fruit. This fruit has a seed in the middle. It's actually a pretty decent sized seed. And it's actually, I'm going to give you another hint that's going to give it away. You may put it on your ice cream. On the very, very, very top. You're right. Hopefully, you said it's a cherry. And if you did, great job. Here's the third one. This one is a little bit different, okay? Name this fruit. I'm going to give you one hint. Sometimes it's on the salad bar. Sometimes it's on the salad bar where you get all your salad stuff. Can you guess what it is? If you guessed an olive, you're absolutely right. Now this next one we're going to do a little bit different, and this is how we're going to do it the rest of the other times that we're going to talk about these fruits of the Spirit, okay? So, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to click the button, and it's going to say, what fruit am I? And I'm going to give you 3 clues to be able to know what fruit this is. And so here we go. Y'all ready? So, what fruit am I? I am yellow and green. A yellow and green fruit. A yellow and green fruit. Okay? Here's your second clue. Hawaii is the world's top producer of this fruit. So, Hawaii is the top producer of this fruit. That's your second clue. Here's your third one. The third clue is, this fruit is cut into rings, crushed up, or it's cut into cubes. Can you guess what this fruit is? If you guessed a pineapple, you're absolutely right. Good job. Next week we're going to have more in that way. This way of giving you clues and you trying to guess of what it is. And so, as we look at the fruit of the Spirit this week, we're going to look at peace. I found this picture, and I think it's a good one for this time of time that we are together, finding peace in the chaos. Chaos is this idea, not knowing what's going on, this idea of not being really organized, but being everywhere, or, well, in our particular situation, and sometimes chaos can happen right where we are. And so, as we look at this idea, we're going to see and talk about this idea of peace. I have a question for you before we get started. The question is, have you ever thought that you had everything in order and organized and you had everything right, or you knew what you were going to do the next day, but then everything changed? Maybe it was this idea that you knew exactly what was going to happen, but then in the end, it doesn't happen. Let me give you an example of something like this. Maybe your family's the next day is about to go to the beach. And as you get ready to go to the beach, you're so excited. You can't wait to see the waves and the sand and all these different things. Maybe the seagulls flying above your head, or the drive there and being able to put your feet in the sand. Whatever it may be, you're so excited for it. But then you wake up and maybe you're sick. Or maybe you don't feel good. Something like that happens. When you think something's about to happen, but then everything changes. Maybe these last few months have helped us to understand that not everything happens exactly how it's going to happen. Maybe you thought you were going to go to school for the rest of the year, but then you have homeschool. or you're at home with school. Maybe it's the idea you thought you were going to have, start with baseball and baseball practice and stuff. But in the end, there's no baseball. Or now, we're just now starting baseball. And so there are some times when we don't fully understand things that are happening or things that are going to happen, and yet they happen anyways. And so this morning, we're going to look at this idea of how the disciples didn't really understand fully of what exactly was happening. In John 16, starting in verse 16, Jesus says this. Jesus went on to say, "In a little while you will see me no more. And then, for a little while, you will see me." If I was a disciple and he said that, I would think, well, maybe he's going to the marketplace. Or maybe he's going somewhere that we can't go for a second and he'll be right back. Or maybe he's using another illustration of saying, maybe it's the idea of hide and go seek. Like, we're going to go find him and then he's going to tell us a parable, a short story with a heavenly meaning of what just happened. Not really understanding what's going on. And so when Jesus says this, the disciples get together and they kind of talk about it. Like, what is he talking about? Jesus not even in this picture right now. And they're just standing there talking like, what's Jesus talking about? Like, why is he saying we're not going to see him, but then we will? Like, is he going to be gone just for a little while? And they're conversating about it. They're talking about it. And Jesus says, basically, he says, are you talking about me, not seeing me, but then seeing me later? Like, is that what you're talking about right now? And so then he tells them this idea. And he gives some examples of that they're going to mourn. They're going to be sad for a little while. But that sad turns into joy. What in the world is Jesus talking about? How he's going to leave and then come back, and then we're going to be sad, but in the end we're going to have joy? Like, what in the world, Jesus? I don't understand what you're saying. And he eventually talks about how he's going to go to the cross. And as he goes to the cross, he's going to die. And as he dies on the cross, he raises from the grave. And this is what he's talking about here, when he's not going to be here for a little while, but then he's going to raise from the grave and meet them where they are. And so, as the disciples have their conversation about what Jesus is meaning from this passage, Jesus comes back and explains what he really means by what he's saying. And so then the disciples say this in verse 29. Then Jesus' disciples said, "Now you are speaking clearly." They understand what Jesus is saying. Back when Jesus was telling parables, they didn't understand. They even came back to Jesus after he left the crowd. "Jesus, what did you mean by that parable that you said?" And he would most of the time explain it to them. And so they say here, "Now you are speaking clearly. You are speaking ways that we can understand, and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things." And that's so important to understand, that Jesus knows all things, and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God. You see, his disciples were with him for 3.5 years, following him footstep by footstep, going right behind Jesus, listening to what he says, watching what he does, all these different things, and watching Jesus do all these different things, and fully not understanding what Jesus is talking about. But now, finally understands what Jesus is saying, what Jesus is about to do. And so as the disciples finally say that Jesus is finally speaking clearly to them, Jesus says this, "Do you now believe?" Jesus replied, "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered. They will move. They will not be together. They will separate, and each to your own home." Now we can kind of understand a little bit of our context of the coronavirus, how we can be able to understand how we've been in our own home. We've been stuck in our house. We've only went out when we've had to go out. Well, they're doing it because they're going to scatter because of persecution. Because they don't know what to do. They're scared. And as they're scared, they leave and they go to their own home. And it says this. Jesus says, "You will leave me Jesus speaking to his disciples that you will leave me all alone. And he says, yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. He's talking about God. God's going to still be with him. Even though Jesus knows all things, he knows what he's going to have to face. He knows all things of what was happening, what was going to happen, and what is happening right now. Jesus knows all things. And he knows that they are going to leave him and that they're going to scatter. But yet he says that his Father, God, is going to continue to be with him. And so Jesus says this in verse 33, and this is so important. I have told you these things so that in me you may have, our word for this week is peace. That you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. In this world, it's going to get frustrating. In this world, it's going to be hard. In this world, you're going to want to get angry. In this world, you're going to want to get mad. But take heart. Take hold of this. Know this. Understand what Jesus is about to say. I have overcome the world. Regardless of what happens in this world, regardless of what happens to each one of us or whatever it may be. Maybe we don't have baseball. Maybe we don't have like the end of school. Maybe, whatever it may be. But take heart and take note that Jesus has overcome the world. Jesus came. He died. And he rose from the grave. And he saw his disciples afterwards. But take heart and know that regardless of what happens, what troubles come our way, that Jesus has overcome the world. This week, we learned 3 things. We learned first that Jesus knows all things. That God knows all things. He knows what is happening. He knows what is yet to come. Number 2, with things that happen in this world, we can have peace. Knowing that regardless of what happens and how mad or frustrated we may be at something, that regardless we can still have peace. And number 3, Jesus has overcome the world. Regardless of what happens, Jesus has overcome everything that we are going to go through, that the disciples went through, the trouble we may have, the suffering, whatever it may be, that Jesus has already overcome those things. And so, the goals this week is when things do not go exactly our way, when we may think about being angry or mad or frustrated or whatever it may be, or if someone makes us frustrated or mad, try to have peace. Because regardless of what happens in this world and what troubles we have, Jesus has overcome the world.